what's going on, I'm Matt. Well, this one's going to be about my second cover. I thought I'd do something a little different. I'll take you back to an earlier time period, the 60s. Let's see if you can recognize this one. Let's see lovers marry our fortunes together. I've got some real estate here in my bag. Something more than a pack of cigarettes. And this is what occupies. Don't look for a man. Simon and Garfunkel's America. Always a nice choice, I'd say. And what I've just, oh God, I wouldn't even know how to describe, the amount of joy I get in listening to music from that time period, especially theirs. I've always been just a huge fan of, Simon and Garfunkel, primarily for their lyrics, like their lyrical interpretations of the world around them. And at that time period too, the 60s was very interesting for many, many different, policies, many social issues, anything, anything, I guess, related to politics. And obviously there were other artists that, kind of captured that mood, say, Dylan, you have, John Lennon, he had his own interpretation of the world around him as well. But I guess what's interesting about them is, they just had, they were so focused on lyrics. They were very poetic. They knew how to they knew how to capture exactly what was going on in ways such as just by matching the harmonies. And for this one, America, this one was really interesting because it consists of the non-rhyming lyrics, which honestly you don't hear too often nowadays in any songs, and so I guess, in that way it's more of a narrative. It tells a story. It has a point where it starts and a point where it finishes, and it just tells sort of a fictional tale of a person who's finding his way to America and discovering certain aspects of, his surroundings, ways of traveling, ways of getting around. And like I mentioned, common back then, so they're really able to capture the period very well. And I also liked about them their harmonies. They were just, they could not have been more dead on when, discussing vocal harmonies. And I just, they're very influential, I think, for the way they sing. Their voices are just a perfect match for one another. You couldn't talk about, more compromising duo. And certainly they were the first, they were the first musician, or one of the first, a few of the first musicians from that time period that I listened to. What really got me more and more into oldies, and what got me to recognize that music from that time period is obviously a lot more influential from, whatever you'd hear now, even though there are a lot of bands I like from this time period and whatnot. But yeah, from then on, I think I was maybe a teenager, and I really got into them, and then that kind of broadened my horizon. I started listening to a bunch of other bands from the time, and they also proved, given their abilities to write lyrics, their abilities to add harmonies, their really unique songwriting, they proved that you didn't really have to do all that much in order to write good music. You didn't have to overproduce. Not much had to go into their songs during the time that they were recorded. They didn't, especially when they played live, they didn't need all these big sections and everything, all these backup musicians. It was just pretty much, Paul Simon and his guitar, and then, Art Garfunkel there to accompany him on vocals and provide harmonies, and that was essentially enough. They're able to draw crowds just doing that little. And yeah, I know it's folk music, so it's quite simple in that way for many different artists who are playing in that, that sort of genre. But I've always just been fascinated. They're people that you could listen to, and you immediately know whether or not, they're common songs that, alright, this is obviously from the 60s. And I think many bands from that decade are very similar. You listen to this, it's 60s pop, whether or not it's early 60s, and had to be songs, whose lengths are like are like right around 3 minutes, you know, and then you expand into like, you know, the late 60s when psychedelic rock became all the rage and people really began experimenting more and putting more into music. But I don't know, I just think that, like, you know, that decade really had a certain feel to it that is enough to get most musicians going, even today, you know, just hearing that and whatnot. They're like really able to get into it. They're really able to get an idea of, you know, how to really take music in a new direction, I'd say. And they could, you know, and they could be influenced by artists like that in their own way, but then have, you know, ideas of their own, sort of like, I guess, a combination. So in a sense, you know, if they were influenced by them and then had their own ideas, you know, they'd be taking music in a new direction. But as far as influence goes, that's, you know, around that time period of Simon and Garfunkel, that's really when they, you know, that's really the most influential. And what I also like about the song itself, America, is that it kind of transitions musically between the verses and the chorus. It's like, found that to be really cool, you know. It's like the verses are in the key of D major, and then the brief part where it kind of transitions into the chorus, it's played in A, and then it goes right back. It's, you know, that almost stands out as like the catchy part of the song, the way it just transitions. Like, they don't need all those harmonies and everything, the hooks that take place only in the chorus. They just need to transition, and that, you know, that suddenly becomes the catchiest part of the song. And the lyrics, of course, are really neat too. When they, you know, ones that just, God, who would expect it? And it also has a really cool outro, I thought, as well. It's, I think, if I remember listening to the studio, it's mostly just, you know, the acoustics, and then it has like a synth, you know, it kind of has, which kind of accompanies whatever's played on the guitars, and a very light use of the bass. It's like, and, you know, that kind of just gradually fades out as it should, because I don't think anything more needed to be added into the song. As far as, like, you know, this song as a cover and playing it live, it's really interesting because at most of my shows, even though it depends on the venue, you know, I have people in the audience of all ages, you know, say I have people like around my age, people who are younger, and then, you know, but this song really strikes a chord with, you know, people who are, say, like, you know, like the baby boomers, people from that time period. This is like, you know, this is like an instant recognition for anything that they grew up with, an instant way for them to, you know, connect with, you know, the person performing it. And those are always, you know, I always get the most applause from people of that generation who happen to be at the show watching, and definitely the best comments and everything. So, I mean, this is a way to strike, you know, a chord with them, and then say like a few of the other covers from, you know, closer to this time period, or popular amongst guys my own age, and, you know, even a few people younger, you know, although I try not to focus too much on that. I like to appeal to people of any age and any type, so, but yeah, that's, you know, that's entirely why this is fun. And then just, you know, as I said earlier, given the lyrics, it's so easy to get into this because it tells a narrative, and those types of songs are always a lot of fun to play and sing, always fun to perform, so.